much, Betty, for joining us today. I'm really excited to learn more about who you are as an artist and what you do. So I figure we can actually just start there. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do as an artist, kind of what all of that entails?
Yeah, thanks, Aubrey. It's an honor to be here and a part of this. So the kind of art that I do is mostly painting, but it's also linked in the work of spiritual formation. So I'm on staff with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship as an assistant director of spiritual formation. And some of the work that I do in my job with InterVarsity, but also like on the side and how they merge together, is actually creating paintings that help people lead them deeper into the presence of Jesus and help them grow in their spiritual formation. And so I love thinking about the spiritual journey and ways that we can convey that in art and lead people in a almost like visual parables of the spiritual journey for them to kind of enter into and kind of gain traction on in their spiritual experience.
I love that so much. How did you develop that idea? How did this come about?
In college, I would often in my prayer times have images that God would give me for my own spiritual life, metaphors like a seed growing under the soil, or a ship that's been kind of shipwrecked and God, stripping that away, or in the scriptures, was just really loved Jesus's images for the spiritual life. And so kind of, halfway through my career with InterVarsity, I felt God tell me, like, I've given you these images of the spiritual journey. Now I want you to actually paint them and invite people into that journey with you, because it translates to other people's spiritual lives as well.
Yeah. So did you study painting in school? Have you always been a painter? Is this something more recent?
Yeah, I've always been an artist since I was little. I loved to write and paint. And when I was in second grade, I wanted to be an author and illustrator of children's books, which turns out I'm not too far off. I do a lot of kind of accompanying my writing and my painting together, although I typically do it for adults these days. But I did study I was an art major in undergrad at Western Michigan University, but have always just had a passion for all kinds of arts. I had a hard time deciding between film and creative writing and visual art. And so, yeah, that's just how it's been in my life.
That's great. So how did InterVarsity and this painting project kind of come together for you?
Yeah, a big part of it was, like I said, I was just kind of on this prayer retreat and just felt like God wanted me to get started. So I did some of it on my own time. And most of the work I create on my own time. But recently I had a sabbatical, and God just really challenged me to go even deeper and to see the ways that the ministry work I was doing with InterVarsity and the things I was creating could meld together and to create experiences for people using my art. And so while on sabbatical, I actually even applied for the job that I'm in now, which has really allowed me the freedom to kind of work with the resources that I create on my own time and then use them in staff formation with our staff at InterVarsity.
Did someone help you to realize that you were artistically gifted?
Yeah, well, a couple people come to mind. First was my uncle Matt, who he still performs as an opera singer, and he now teaches at a small college teaching voice. And when he would come to visit, I would help him with his lines. And he also was gifted in all kinds of art mediums. He taught me how to paint. And I remember we would go camping or something and we would just paint the trees in the sky. And he really helped cultivate that in me. And then, like I said, when I was in second grade, I had a teacher who just really encouraged me and said, you could be an artist or a writer. And so my parents were very encouraging of those gifts as well. So it was, thankfully, I know not every artist has this experience, but I've been very thankful that I've had parents who've encouraged that over the course of my life and just, saw those gifts in me and called those out as well.
Yeah. And I really love how you're taking these artistic gifts and actually joining them into this kind of non-artistic job in a way that's so creative and amazing to me.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, what are the highs and lows of that kind of experience?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think for a long time, and I know a lot of Christian artists feel this way, is I kind of dichotomize sort of my ministry life or my faith life over here and my art life over here. And in various stages of my life, God has continued to challenge me to bring them together. And so for a while in inner varsity, I was doing a job that really wasn't engaging in my art very much at all. And kind of looking around to see, okay, ministry looks this way and it, is done this way. So I better do it this way, and kind of shape shifting to be whatever environment needed me to be. But it wasn't until really sabbatical, like I said, that I think God gave me a lot of creative breakthrough. I went through the Artist's Way book. If you've ever read that, it's an incredible resource that helps artists get unstuck in their creative life. And I went through that and just felt like God was kind of trying to help me uncover some of those lies or some of the things that were keeping me from creating and keeping me from really owning my voice and owning the contribution that I can give the world as an artist. And just challenged me to start doing it, whether or not I had permission. I think a lot of times we wait for permission from somebody, whether it's a supervisor or it's a parent or somebody, in whatever field we are, we feel like, oh, I can't do this, or it's not legitimate unless somebody asks me to do it or says I can. And over sabbatical, I think God just gave me the freedom just to do it, just to start creating and see what would happen. And that's when he really started to open the doors, is when I started taking those risks and those steps to create.
Are there times then when you've experienced failure with that? It sounds like this has been really successful overall and a really a blessing and something that God has called you to do. But are there times where you've experienced failure, and how have you kind of handled that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, there was always failure that you experience as an artist, that when you're first learning your craft, I remember I was just thinking about this the other day, creative writing classes where I was testing out some ideas. And if you've ever been a creative writer in a creative writing workshop, you just get slammed by your peers sometimes. And I just remember feeling like, oh, like they don't like my work. I guess I'm not good at this, or I guess I can't keep going. And so in some senses, I think there were times that I maybe tried to morph to be somebody else's version of success, or rather than kind of going back into my own craft and just making it better, saying like, okay, well, my voice or what I bring isn't valuable in this environment. So either I'm not going to offer it, or I'm going to offer it in a different way that they want me to give. And so I think that unfortunately that happened for me when I experienced failure. But I think even a bigger aspect for me that I started just talking about, of how I experienced failure, was actually the failure to try, and the failure to not actually believe that my gifts have value, and that the things that God wants me to create can actually make an impact in people's lives. And so I think more than anything, the failure in my life has been the failure of uh, just starting to believe more in what other people want of me, and believe more in other people's version of success than in my own call. So, yeah,
Yeah,
God really had to break me free from that.
yeah, absolutely. That's such a powerful idea that if you're not trying, then you're already kind of failing. You're
Mm.
failing to do anything at all, which is a failure in and of itself, which isn't
Hmm.
necessarily what we typically think of. So that's
Hmm.
a really, really great point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really depends. Failure is defined by how you define success,
Mm,
right? So, if you define success as, you know, performing at the Met, or getting your artwork featured in a museum in New York, or selling a certain number of prints or whatever, then most of the time you're going to feel like a failure, but I think if you can define success more as staying true to the work that you feel that God has created you to do, and actually committing to that and staying true to the artist path, then failure looks different.
Yeah. To that end, do you have any advice for young artists, either kind of visual artists like you or other types of artists who may be struggling with these types of fears of trying it all, or having their work not be appreciated when it comes out? Any of the things that you've struggled with, what would you tell them?
There's some advice that Rainer Rilke gives in his book, Letters to a Young Poet, where he talks about how the best thing that we can do as artists sometimes is actually to look within, instead of always looking around to see what are other people doing, or am I doing it right compared to them, or am I being successful, as we talked about it, as the way the world defines it, or as the way that my typical career path defines it. We're never going to find ourselves and the true voice that we have and the unique contribution that we have to give. And it really requires us, I think, true creative work. The best creative work is an overflow of who we are. And it's an overflow of something that is really handcrafted within us. So it's not going to help us create our best work if we're always looking around and comparing ourselves to other people, or saying, I should be more like this, or I should do it this way, but to actually turn inward and to create that space almost in solitude and silence of discovery, and allow the work to emerge from within naturally.
So great. Well, thank you so much, Betty, for your time and for all of these words of wisdom. And we will talk to you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks, Aubrey.
Also, this is just like a random side note that I'll cut out then, but of course my upstairs neighbor has decided to like move furniture or something right now. So I'm hoping this doesn't mess up our audio.